Hello and welcome back to Scale to Exit with Alejandra Santos. And today I'm very excited to bring our guest. Our guest is named Patrice Williams-Lindo. She is the CEO of Career Nomad, and she stands as a beacon of innovation and thought leadership in the realms of professional development and organizational growth. Her distinguished career was marked by significant roles in consulting and a deep expertise in organizational psychology and instructional technology has made her an indispensable resource for navigating the complexity of the modern work environment. She integrates her learnings into her work, which are very holistic and forward thinking. She has credentials in prompt engineering and generative AI, alongside foundational courses in cybersecurity awareness and the AWS Cloud Practitioner Bootcamp. So, one of her things that she presents all the time, she focuses on the practical application of AI and cybersecurity in driving ethical and secure business innovations. She has been recognized for her ability to blend technical acumen with strategic foresight, and she ensures that her audience is equipped with actionable insights for implementing responsible AI solutions. So, with that being said, I want to share with you a few topics that we actually discussed. So, we talked about her journey to consulting and instructional design. We talked about the birth of Career Nomad. She shares a very interesting story. We talk about everything in the modern workplace as a boss, as an employee. She also talks about how to navigate economic uncertainty, and she shares some strategies and frameworks that you should practice. The RNA, which is so interesting. You guys need to tune in for that one. Rebranding strategies for recovery, which is RNA. The mindset shifts for organizational transformation that needs to happen in human beings to transform their business, and developing technical acumen in a digital world. So we have a very spicy and saucy conversation, and I hope you tune in any platform of your choice. If you are on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. All of these episodes are curated with so much love from the people that come in here, from us here at Scale to Exit. We are putting energy and so much effort to bring you valuable information. You, the business owner, the founder, the entrepreneur, the future exiter, to really, really, really grasp on a lot of really good concepts and insights from experts in their field. That way you can prepare yourself for any uncertainties that is going on right now, or you can prepare your business for an exit, or you can just tune in and have a glass of wine and enjoy our conversation because we make it fun. So I hope you tune in YouTube to see our faces because we are very pretty interesting individuals. So with that being said, I will come in and bring Patrice Lindo. But yeah, remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe, okay, to the channel of your choice. And yeah, just give me some feedback. And without further ado, I'll see you on the other side. All right. Well, thank you for coming to Scale to Exit, Miss Patrice Lindo. And I am so admired by your career. You have such a blend of organization psychology, instructional technology, and consulting. My question right now is what inspired your journey into these fields and how have they shaped your approach to leadership and innovation?
So I will tell you this. So I ended up being in consulting as a result of becoming an adult, if that made sense, while I was an adult. So I worked in healthcare. I sold real estate. I had a family business that I was a very significant part of. And there was a common, as they would say in consulting, red thread, right? There was a common theme throughout each of these. And there was an aspect of taking really complex, processes or ideas and breaking them down. But where I ended, I really wanted the stability of a 9 to 5 job that, paid decently, but I also had work-life balance. And I was able to find pieces of that in different places. So,
Yeah.
for example, when I was in healthcare, loved it. The pay wasn't great, and I hated working every other weekend and the holidays. Then when I got into teaching, I love the teaching. I love the, being able to see that light come on as I was breaking down a concept, because I truly believe that the onus was on the instructor, the teacher, right? To make the information palatable so that the learner could learn, so to speak. But then I didn't like the kids. I didn't like the discipline, right? I love the process, but I didn't like the audience. So what I wanted to do was kind of find a way to bridge those two things. And so I decided to go back to school. And when I went back to school, I finished my MBA. And when I finished my MBA, I found that I really like learning myself, right? And like applying in that, in the jobs I was in. And I loved it so much, I decided to go back for a second MBA. I mean, a second master's. And the second master's was in instructional design and technology. And I went into that because there was a mom who came into one of the school that I was teaching at. And I liked the way she kind of carried herself. I was intrigued, not just by her clothes, but kind of like just her aura. And so I asked her one day, because I had been thinking about it and I was like nervous, and I was like, okay, so this is a good sign, right? If I'm nervous, like there's something there. So I asked her one day, I said, hi, Mrs. So-and-so, what is it that you do for work? Because I noticed that, you're always, very well put together and blah, blah, blah. So she goes, oh, I'm an instructional designer. And I go, what is that? Because I had never heard of that before. And she goes, girl, you do that every day. She was like, I take apart curriculum, I put it together, whether it's in a training or whether corporate wise or for schools or for textbook writing, it's curriculum development. And I go, oh, yeah. I was like, so like I study, for example, what I'm going to teach my students before, and like I kind of, get my talking points and examples and work through it. And I said, and there are times when I'm like, this makes no sense. So I literally like throw all the pieces in the air and then put it back together so that I understand it. And then once I understand it, I can, teach the children. She goes, exactly. So I go, well, how did you get these types of roles? So she was like, well, I studied it. She goes, and there's a ton. Now I'm going to date myself. This was back in the early 2000s. She goes, there's a ton of online colleges that you can study this. She was like, especially since you already have a master's already. She was like, check it out. I'm sure that you could do this online. And then it's just a matter of formality, because then when you get it, you can go into this. So long story short, that's how I got into instructional design, to formalize, right, what I had been doing all along. Because I would literally be like, oh, this is crap, and I would kind of like get the meat out, make up my own like speaking notes, and teach, and, the kids would get it. And so once I did that in my second master's, my career counselor in my second program says to me, because at that point, I'm just loving being in school. Like I don't have a whole family and like priorities. She was like, so she said, listen to me, before you sign up for any more education, you need to go to work. And so I was like, okay. She was like, I was like, well, I'm not sure what to do, because right now, yeah, I can be an instructional designer, blah, blah. She goes, well, every company has an HR department or a training and development department or a change management, she was like, go start with a consulting firm. She was like, you may not be able to get in with the big ones, but you're in Atlanta, start with a small one. And then, so said, so done. She told me that, Alejandra. I updated my resume, and like I graduated in April. I had a job by May. It was
Wow.
so fast. I did not realize that there was a need, number one, because I had those transferable skills. So by now, I
Mhm.
like have had cross industry experience. By then, I have two master's degrees, and I already showed a propensity to kind of like be agile and learn and apply.
Yeah.
And so when I got into consulting, I was put into process improvement / business optimization. So think
Mhm.
like factories that may have been looking for ways to be more efficient, where there was
Mhm.
waste, unfortunately
Mhm.
at times when you had a reduction in force, that
Yeah.
sort of thing,
Yeah.
helping, companies kind of map out, where their systems may have been broken or could have been improved. And so that was how I got into consulting. So that was a long answer, but that's my answer.
I love it though. I mean, so instructional technology is basically creating curriculums into the personal development in the business.
Well, it can be applied that way. So it's
Okay.
actually instructional development and design. And then the technology is how you do it, right? So think of like when you go on Coursera, for
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
or any of the learning platforms. That's the technology, right? But they all, for the most part, operate similarly. So, like, how do you put those courses together to go
Mhm.
into those systems, right? There's a
Okay.
body of content, there are questions, maybe there's testing. How do we know that that information is accurate? How do we, grade it by level, beginner, intermediate, advanced, that sort of thing. And then, of course, if they are for, like, let's say, continuing education units, if you're a licensed professional, or, let's say you're an HR professional and you have to have a certain number of learning credits, you have to write to that standard.
So, okay, so you combined organizational psychology
Yep,
in the workforce with
correct.
the instructional technology and the consulting together, and
Correct.
this
With
is
a
how
business
career
administration degree.
and that's how Career Nomad came into
That is
be
because
born.
then now, once I was in consulting, I did consulting, oh my gosh, I'm thinking back. So I started Career Nomad in 2020. This year is 5 years old. So at that point, I had been in consulting about 12 years. So I was in
Okay.
there 12 years, and I had realized, like, wait a minute. So this is great, like money and such, but I also knew that there was still like at least from the my contemporaries, my colleagues that, like, I had gone to school with and such, a lot of them did not realize that, the option of consulting did exist, that they could use, whether it be their teaching skills or nursing skills or whatever the
Mhm.
case might be, that they had a core set of skills that could be applied to consulting, because consulting was across industry, right? It wasn't just technology. So you have government, you have private sector to begin
Mhm.
with. Then you
Mhm.
have healthcare and products and communications and media. There's a lot of different options. And so once I learned that adaptability, I was like, girls, listen. Stop teaching. You don't have to do that and give up your summers. Now, you may have to travel, because that was the other part of it, right? There was a level of travel, especially at the beginning. You're a road warrior, but the more seasoned I became, the more I was able to grow my career or pick organizations that didn't make traveling as much of a requirement. And then I was able to, grow my career and income that way. And so I took that. That was how I figured out, the need for Career Nomad, because at that
Mm.
point, you've got this good job, you stayed on this good job, you didn't leave, you went up their ladder. And I drank the Kool-Aid to begin with, which I think is important. You settle, you settle, and you kind of build your foundation. But then you get to a place, at least if you're someone like myself, that you're like, okay, this is good, but I'm bored. Like, what else is there? And even if you get promoted, I just knew that I wanted to learn more and do more. And so once I tried to do that within my company, and it didn't seem I was making any progress, I literally was like, you know what? Let's see what's going on. It's really just kind of matter of fact, like, what will it hurt, right? It was just kind of like, let me tweak my LinkedIn, let me see what comes up. No lie, Alejandra, I did this, let's say, the end of September. By the end of October, I had a full offer, and I was leaving the organization to get a promotion and a better paying job. So at first, I thought it was a fluke. So I went there to the next company. I was doing that. And then while I was there, I had not even been there 60 days. Another firm reached out, and they were like, hey, we're starting up, this angle, and we see that you have expertise in this area. We'd love to talk to you. So I learned some things there, right? Because I was like, wait, so first of all, the play is really to have them reach out to you, not you reach out to
Mm.
them. And then
Mhm.
secondly, visibility, right? Making sure that in your industry that you stay visible, so that, when people are looking for, tastemakers and leaders and that sort of thing, they're not digging to find you. Like, if they Google, your area of work, for example, your name would pop up on a short list. And so I literally did that. So literally in 3 months, I'm sorry, not 3 months. In 18 months, I had three jobs. And so the job I started with, and the one I went to, and the next one, and each time I got a promotion. I was able to get sign-on bonuses. I was able to make more money. And I was like, wait, pause. If I had said 18 months at this company, the original company, at best, I would have gotten a 5% raise. Whereas moving from one company to the next, I was able to literally increase my income by over $60,000 baseline. And then I was able to get sign on bonuses in both places. So when I really looked at it all together, I was net able to make an additional $100,000 over that time. Not all at once, but, like, incrementally, the way I did it. So for me, that's where I realized, wait, there's some potential in job hopping. Like
Mm.
there's some, skill to it. You can't just job hop to job hop. It's got to make sense. So for me, I stayed in the same industry, for example. So if I wanted to make any big life decisions like buying a house or anything like that, they wouldn't have said, oh, you switched too many jobs, because I stayed in the same industry, for example. I still was building my 401k. I still had excellent health benefits,
Mhm.
and I was getting more and more or closer and closer to the work that I loved. So that was why I did it. And so that's how Career Nomad was born. Because like I've got to tell other people. Like they may not know this. Like you're trying to be a lifer and you could be out here exploring. So it's akin to like, if you stay in the place you were born and you never travel anywhere, then you
Mm.
think that the place you're
Yeah.
born is the only place to see until you
Yeah.
travel. And then you
Mm.
travel and you're like,
Where have I
missing
been my whole
this,
life?
right? There's a lot
Yeah.
to learn. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
So
I
that's why,
love that.
yep,
Yeah. So career nomad basically stands for growth, like
yep.
really getting out of your comfort zone and really exploring new opportunities.
In your field
And
of
that's
work, right?
mhm,
Career pivoting strategically.
career pivoting. Yes.
Hmm.
I imagine you're really busy right now with the whole federal government, what's happening in the during the
Yes,
Trump
yes. I've been on a
administration.
ton of different well, I've had a couple of different interviews, and then just today I had a post go viral on LinkedIn. I mean, there
Okay.
are people that like for example have been laid off, and like one
Uh-huh.
guy worked, I believe it was at the CDC, got laid off, and now he's pressure washing porches. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with pressure washing. God bless him, right? He's finding something to do. But his main thing was like, what do I do with these really specialized skills? And he didn't know, like kind of like he's always been this, let's say a data scientist, I don't know if that's what it was, but
Yeah.
he's always been in this role and he kind of grew up in this field. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't know the way to really narrow down those core transferable skills and also tell a story about, hey, yes, for example, if you're a data scientist, I used to be a data scientist, but I'm really good at these 6 things, and so I can help you do XYZ. And so that's what Career Nomad does, right? We help you to get down to what your story is, building that arc, and then you being able to use that to basically sell your way into this new role or whatever industry you're trying to go into. So it's not starting from scratch, it's starting from experience.
Even though the experience is completely different, like it could be a
Yeah,
whole different industry,
yeah,
but you're teaching people how to transfer
yeah,
their hard skills
yes.
and their soft skills into a new industry, even though they have no experience. The resume says you're good. Like if I want to go from finance to marketing, but
Mm-hmm.
you have those skills
Yep,
already of like
yep, yep,
looking at numbers,
yep.
and marketing is all about numbers at the end of the day.
Correct,
So you
correct.
create that. So, oh, that's so
And it's not
interesting.
hard and soft skills as much as core transferable skills,
Yes.
because the
Yes.
hard and soft makes it kind of like want want, when you're talking
Yeah.
about soft skills, but it's
Yeah.
definitely that. We just don't
Yeah.
call it that because
Yeah.
sometimes people turn off when they
Yeah.
hear those things. So when I
Okay.
talk about core transferable skills, for example, the core transferable skills that I brought from, let's say, teaching, right, was the ability to influence others, the ability to
Mm.
communicate effectively, the ability to, work in crisis, situations or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
So then I was able to handle, let's say, stakeholder management and user experience and marketing and comms in the business world. So if people learn how to translate, right, what they know how to do from one space to the other, then that makes it, a much different conversation when people are literally rebranding themselves and then networking with different
Mm.
people and then really
Mhm.
talking about
Mhm.
their proof points, right? Their
Yeah.
their experiences where they've created and driven outcomes. So I teach
Yeah.
them to speak in terms of outcomes and results versus tasks and like their credentials, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, quantifiable outcomes. So
Yep.
this is a very niche career that you're
Mm-hmm.
in. Um, it's just you don't hear that very often, So,
Mm-hmm.
but
I
you
do.
also have yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you also have a lot of school in behind your belt with the
Yes.
AI. So you study AI,
Mm-hmm.
governance,
Mm-hmm.
cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm. Those are qualifications, skilled qualifications that I picked up on the job. So I take the courses to kind of keep my
Okay.
I'm going to call it skills sharp, right, and relevant for today's market. So
Yeah.
yes, I definitely do. I think that's important.
How do you go into today's market? How do you see AI reshaping the modern workplace, and what ethical challenges should business leaders be mindful of?
So AI is, as we all know, everywhere, right? So it's reshaping how, I'm going to say, repetitive tasks are handled, right?
Mhm.
So if you
Mhm.
think of like research, for a client meeting, if you think of talking points or communications that need to be built, if you think of, getting a summary, an overall executive summary, for example, built out for a leadership briefing, there are
Mhm.
ways that AI accelerates those processes, but it does not supersede human intervention and interaction. Because
Mm.
even though you may say, act as a copywriter and write me a television program about, women in career pivots, it can write that for you. However, for you to make it truly authentically yours, you still would have to take that framework and really add and take away and really, mold it into your own. So if you think of, like, if you're going to bake a cake, you need the eggs, you need the flour, you need the sugar, the butter, blah blah blah. Or you can buy a cake mix where all you do is add flour and oil, right?
Mm.
Do which way do
Mhm.
you want to do it? Do you want to do the flour, the eggs, the salt, and sugar, or do you want the cake mix?
Mhm.
Some people feel like a cake's a cake, so it doesn't matter. Why not do it faster, easier with the cake mix?
Yeah.
Others are like, no, no, no. I want to crack my eggs. I want to sift the flour. It's a matter of school of thought. So I think it's number one, dependent on the culture of the
Mm.
organization, right? Some organizations are still in the pace of wanting the pieces. Some are ready to
Mhm.
do or adapt to the
Mhm.
cake mix. Some people just want to go to the store and buy the cake, right? Some people
Mm.
don't want any of it. At the end of the day, they just want cake. So you have to
Mhm.
kind of figure out what lane they're in and how does that align with your personal values. Then, as far as ethics go, now here's the thing. You can't pass off, for example, the cake from the store as your cake because you didn't
Mm.
bake that cake, right?
Mhm.
So that's where the ethics comes in with AI. So if you are, for example, solutioning, for example, for a client, or if you are, let's say, innovating within your company, whatever the case might be, I think you definitely have to handle AI with guardrails, right? You're not going to put, or you shouldn't, I should say, put proprietary information into AI tools, because then it's open, right, for whoever to use it. And likewise, if you use AI to accelerate, your process, you should acknowledge, you know what I mean, that this is AI powered or AI, blah, blah, blah. So I think transparency is a big part of the ethics. I think guardrails and governance is a big part of the use. And I think just good old wisdom, right? In, being aware of how things are used. I do think that we need to embrace it because it's not going anywhere. And people have been talking about machine learning, for example, for a long time. So for it to have gotten to this place where, it is a part of our lives, whether we want it or not, there's some level of embracing that has to happen, but also in a way that is wise and judicious.
So you talked about really good points, guardrails and governance. Like,
Mhm.
what are some key AI governance practices that people should put in place?
That's a great question. So, number one, like, I know for me, I make sure that I stay tapped in. When I
Mm.
say tapped in, to the place of, like, what are the latest, I'm going to say, trends within AI? What are the
Mhm.
latest cases where AI has been an accelerator or it's been a deviant, right?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
are you well read on AI? And if so, how are you disseminating and applying that information from a level of awareness? I also do feel like, depending again on what you in the workplace manage, I think there's a certain level of success, I'm going to say, cybersecurity that, should
Mhm.
be a part of everybody in the organization's responsibility, right? Because if you think
Yeah.
of things like, phishing attacks and all the different things that happen, it could be that one person that's not even in the CIO department that
Mhm.
opens up a suspicious email and it impacts the entire
Yeah.
organization.
Mhm.
So I think, that's the level of where I think AI should be used to be able to say to your organization, like, hey, so we're going to run some tests to make sure that, our security posture is what it needs to be, so that we are doing everything we can to prevent, cyber attacks. I also think that it's important, like I said, that everybody has a certain level, like in our organization, we have to do ethics and compliance, regardless of where you sit in the organization. People have to take a generic, not generic, but a general ethics and compliance course that
Mm-hmm.
100% of the organization needs to take.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that needs to be a part of the AI structure as well, but with the AI focus or the AI governance focus lens. So those are the things that I would say that organizations should be looking at to make it make sense as we are, getting more and more indoctrinated with AI.
So, saying now that we're talking so much into AI,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people are doing decision making based on AI,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, how do we make sure that businesses are mitigating bias and inaccuracy while leveraging all of this AI for growth, decision making, scaling?
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we
How
do
do
that?
we make sure that they're mitigating bias? And what was the other
Bias
thing?
and
And
inaccuracies.
inaccuracies. Okay. So I think it's important. Well, number one, I think when we think about bias, a
Mm-hmm.
diverse set of ideas. So
Mm-hmm.
at this point, I'm not even talking about people. A diverse set
Mm-hmm.
of ideas is always your best antidote to,
Okay.
making sure at least that you
Mm.
address bias in the best
Okay.
ways that you can, right? Does it
Mm-hmm.
completely eradicate bias? No, but it
Mm-hmm.
definitely does help to offset it. And if nothing else, give you pause, right? To make sure that, well,
Okay.
wait a minute, is there something here? Is there something that we should look into further? I want to make sure that we have checked ourselves, if that makes sense, so that we are referring to whether it be a small tech company,
Mm-hmm.
healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
enterprise level organizations,
Yeah.
that we have really a diverse set of thought. Then
Mm-hmm.
it's also important that you use like a practical framework or tools and
Mm-hmm.
policies that help to
Mm-hmm.
mitigate that bias so
Mm-hmm.
that way, whether I'm doing it in CIO or if they are in the CFO department or if it's in the business itself, that
Mm-hmm.
everybody in that organization is following the same sheet of music, as they would say. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you would need practical frameworks or tools, like I said, that ethics and compliance kind of course requirement, and then really making sure that we home down on our business and potential areas of exposure with all hands coming together to make sure we mitigate that bias.
Okay, I love that you said frameworks because I know that you have a framework that you use, the RNA, right? Do you want to
Yes,
talk about
correct.
that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So one of the things that I do, I chose that framework because just like when I was doing the different, industries like healthcare and education and entrepreneurship, there were some common themes that I kept seeing come up, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when I decided, for example, that I was going to teach people how to pivot, for example, I had to really peel back the layers and say, okay, what are the steps of what I'm doing, right? So it started with like almost like a step by step accounting for like a day in
Okay.
the life of, right? So
Okay,
I
okay,
would be
okay.
like, okay, what I did at the beginning of the day, middle of the day, how I, interacted with my clients, what were specific things I needed to make sure I had to make sure I could develop my status reports, how did I drive to the outcomes that we needed to do? So then there was a level of, okay, so the first thing is I need people to understand that I am, let's say, the change management person, for example. That's my brand. If they didn't know me as that, then I definitely have to brand or rebrand myself as that, because initially when you walk in, they're like, oh, here comes another consultant. Like, what does she want? Right? Like, what
Yeah.
is she doing here?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to, build that level of trust and credibility. Then networking. Okay. So whether I'm on a client site or in my organization or even just at an industry event, the people that are usually where the opportunities lie, right? It wasn't just on LinkedIn or Glassdoor or that sort of thing. It's, hey, I know this girl and she's really good at such and such. You should talk to her, blah, 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 that kind of connection. So I realized that intentional connections and that networking was really what made the difference, right? So that would go miles beyond, the best resume and the best application, because when somebody is willing to put their name and reputation on the line for it to refer you in, then that made all the world of a difference. Then the next
Mm-hmm.
thing is being able to speak to the work I had done. So not that I had, two master's degrees, Not that I'd even worked for these different firms, but what were the results that I was able to do? So, for example,
Mm.
when I created a course, I created it for targeted personas. And I did
Mhm.
targeted personas because if you do them all at once, one of the leaders I first worked with, when I first got my degree in instructional technology, she goes, "That's sheep dipping." And I go, "What is
Mm.
that?" She goes, "Where you just put everybody through all the things." She was like, "There's no need to do that. Come up with personas. Like, who are the different groups that would be
Mhm.
experiencing this impact or
Mm.
change? And then
Mhm.
maybe like some people need 2 hours of training, some people need 8 hours of training, some people just need a quick reference guide. Like, be very strategic in how you really dole out the time that you need to be face to face and their supporting materials. So again, I was able to take that approach and literally talk about how, for example, I have coached over 3,500 people to pivot their careers. How does that
Mm.
look? What does that look like? That looks
Mhm.
like meeting with some, just like I'm talking to you
Mm.
now, where we do like a career strategy audit. For some,
Mhm.
it means like working with them over months, sometimes even years. For some, it's, "Hey, can you redo my resume?" And I redo it and then coach them on how to do their interview. But they're different stages, and you have to meet each person where they are. And I work with people based on their personas, where they fall into the career nomad journey.
Mm. Okay. But the RNA, what does it stands for?
Rebrand is the R,
Rebrand. Uh-huh.
network,
Network.
and achieving recognition.
Achieving recognition.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, yes.
Rebrand and network and achievement. But this is something that anybody can put into place, even if they're not pivoting in their
That's
career. Like to be.
absolutely correct, because that's what
Mm-hmm.
I use in my day-to-day work. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
do. For example, when I'm talking to you right now, right?
Yeah.
I rebranded. That was how you and I connected initially, right? On the
Yes.
platform.
Uh-huh.
And then we networked, like we talked to each other and like, "Oh, okay." And then now achieving recognition, like we have this proof point. We've met
Yeah.
together. We're talking about career pivots. So the next
Mm.
time, for example, you want to talk to another career coach or another person, you can say, "Well, I've had this interview, for example, with a career pivot coach." That's you talking about your own level of success and what you've achieved. You're not waiting on somebody to say, "Oh, Alejandra, you have this, so you can go do this." You are empowered to be able to say, "Nope, I've met with these people, or I've accomplished
Mm.
this, result, or I've had this
Mm-hmm.
outcome." And it's basically empowerment and self promotion in a structured way that speaks to the gap that that person or organization has.
Wow. Okay. So basically, you're saying that we're constantly, as individuals, RNAing ourselves
Uh,
every day,
You
every
should be.
decision. Yeah.
You should be. I mean, some people aren't, but you should be, at least to stay ahead of the game, right? And to really own your outcomes. Yes.
Okay. To really own your outcomes because you're basically in control of your reality.
Or as
That's
much
what
as you can be, right?
as you
And then
can be.
show up
Mm-hmm.
in that way. And I found that when you are constantly like, you may have the rebrand like together, and then you're working on your networking. Like once you get that foundation started, you may say, "Well, I really need to like find out who the power players are in this particular area." Or maybe you
Mm-hmm.
have the network and you have the rebranding, but you feel weird, like talking about yourself and how you did this work. So then you have to keep doing it and build that muscle, because if people don't know what you're doing, right? Visibility is currency. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are able to effectively communicate, like, "Hey, I have been able to accomplish X, Y, and Z, or I have, experience in this area, and so I can apply it to this area," then that's what opens doors for you.
Okay.
Mhm.
So how can you elaborate how can a business owner use RNA during an economic downturn or during a business downturn?
So, what kind of business? Give me a little bit more specific, because then I can give
Just
you a more specific
okay, so
example if
let's
something that you could think of.
yeah, let's put an example out of nowhere.
Okay.
An e-commerce business. An e-commerce
E-commerce
business that
business.
sells beauty products. Let's
Okay,
just
so
say
an
that.
e-commerce business that's selling beauty products is has been dozed. They have been they're experiencing an economic downturn, and
Yes.
so how would we use RNA to support them? Am I hearing you correctly?
Correct, yes.
Okay, let's think about it. So if we are applying this framework, I guess the other thing that I want to make sure of is, how big is the business, for lack of a better word? Is it a small business, or is it
Let's
like a
just
L'Oreal?
oh wow. Yeah, let's say that this business is doing 5 millions in revenue and they've been around
5
for
million
6
in revenue.
years.
Okay,
Yeah.
5 million in revenue and around 4 to 6 years. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Mhm.
So, I would say the first thing that we want to think about is, how they can leverage their current, whatever that status is. Because again, they're not going to throw everything away, right?
Yeah.
You want to
Mhm.
be really thoughtful so that as they're facing these, they're not in a position where they don't feel practical and they don't feel powerful because they do have those
Mm.
things available to them. So one of the things that they want to make sure of is what's caused the downturn. So in this case, if they've been, let's say it's government, or whatever, layoffs or whatever that's impacting them, there may be, some sort of backlash, for example, because if they're not able to produce things the way they normally would have, maybe quality has gone down, or maybe there's been some sort of mismanagement because of like less people or something. Again, this is all hypothetical, which would lead to like sales decreasing, low consumer trust, and basically their visibility declining, right? So how do they handle that? So then they're in survival mode. So how do we get them from survival mode to a place where they can really stand back up, on their 2 feet in a way that makes sense, right? I think one of the first things to think about is from a rebranding perspective, do an audit your
Mhm.
brand, analyze the existing perception of the
Mhm.
brand through social listening,
Mm.
customer feedback, reviews.
Mhm.
What, because
Mhm.
you can't, like when you go to the doctor, he can't just give you medicine without running some tests and doing some sort of assessment, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
triage basically the business. Then typically I would say messaging makeover, right? So there are different layers of the rebranding. So the first one is the audit. The next thing is messaging makeover. So shift the narrative from just being another beauty company to maybe a mission led company, right? That
Mm.
centers
Mhm.
things like wellness, inclusion,
Mhm. Mhm.
transparency,
Yeah.
science backed, innovation, things that are
Mhm.
really credible, right? That would be important. The third thing I would say for the rebrand is when it comes to like visual, like notes or visual identity. So update their packaging if possible, right? Social media, make sure that that's, where it needs to be, like a fresh new look, type
Yeah.
thing. Make sure that their website copy and ads reflect this new thing. So it's not just them talking the talk, they're also walking the talk as they're doing it.
Mhm.
So those would be the things that I would say from a rebranding perspective that they want to make sure of. And most importantly, their storytelling. You've got to be able to tell the story of this organization. Position the fall or whatever, the decline as a part of their transformation story. So they started here, then something happened and they fell, and this is how we're going on the way back up. So it's kind of like we listened, we learned, and now we're leveling up. So again, it's
Mhm.
that arc, right? That story arc. So that would be the whole rebrand piece of this. Now, when it comes to networking, you're like, okay, it's a business, right? How does a business like network? So if you think of like connecting to move forward, strategic
Mm.
collaborations. So for
Mhm.
example, if they are a beauty company, maybe if they connected with hairdressers, estheticians, nail technicians, dermatologists, other beauty professionals, people that could use and promote their goods, right? This is a great way to reintroduce the brand and get it into the hands of more people. They almost become like their own what do they call them, the people that flash mob, they become their own flash mob, in a way that they're able to get to different parts of the country, different parts of the population. If you think of a hair salon has, from professionals to entrepreneurs to all different kinds of people from all different walks of life. So if you're able to do those diverse collaborations, with using diverse, I'm going to say, people to bring in those strategic connections, that's one way they could.
Mhm.
The second would be retail partnerships. So if you think of like how people sometimes partner with, like I said, L'Oreal or Cream of Nature or, oh gosh, I can't even think, Procter and Gamble, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Mhm.
different ways that you can
Mhm.
basically reapproach, how to reintroduce in a, like you're borrowing almost some of their social currency and
Yeah.
credibility by linking up with those bigger companies, right? So if they come into the marketplace with, sponsored by L'Oreal, there are doors that would be open to them that wouldn't typically be open, that highlights those renewed values. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
So So wait, so let me the first one. Let's go ahead and rebrand, analyze the brand,
Yes.
do
Uh
an
huh.
audit,
Yep.
see what's working, what's not working by doing customer service, by connecting with the consumer, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Customer
probably like,
listening. Mm-hmm.
yeah, consumer listening.
Yep.
And then go ahead and rebrand by changing the packaging, the
Yep.
visual, the messaging
Yep.
accordingly to what you think the consumer would be more connected
That
to.
refreshed view. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and a
Mm-hmm.
refresh view. Then the second one would be strategic collaborations,
Yeah.
right? Or
Networking.
maybe
Mm-hmm.
networking, or maybe do create partnerships with
Yep.
other companies,
Yep.
create like Nike and Schemes. They
Yep.
have like a product right now that's like
Yep.
a in order to save Nike's brand. So that's a good one. And then
Yep.
the third one,
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, there's one more that I think is really important:
one more. Okay.
investor and advisor outreach. So, who
Okay.
can you bring in, excuse me, as a subject matter expert that comes in and can help to re-engage investors and mentors? Because money, right?
Okay.
If you can
Mhm.
get money behind your change, then that helps with the sustainability of it all.
Okay.
So you
Yeah.
want to make sure that you've done the footwork, with collaborating, but you also want to have that level of expertise that's dedicated to really re-engaging the investors, re-engaging those advisors, so that
Mhm.
there's a rebrand roadmap that they can see the turnaround strategy and they can get behind to really push that forward and support the efforts. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
That makes sense. And then how do we get AI involved in all of this?
So I would say for the AI piece of things, AI can definitely help in the rebranding. For example, as we're
Mhm.
talking about like the
Mhm.
copy and the
Yeah.
ideas, the
Yes.
innovation part of it.
Mhm.
AI can be used to accelerate that. Not the only tool, but it can be used to image, for example, what your new products would look like. It could be used to create, the social media blitz or the campaign. It can be used for marketing and comms. It could be
Mm.
used to kind of come up with who those strategic collaborations could be with potentially. So I think you could be used both in the R and in the networking as well, because the networking, it can help you literally create almost like a mind map, right, for who you can get in touch with you being at the core. Who are the different industries and companies related to those industries that you can connect with to make your networking efficient?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And then for the achieving, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I was
Yeah.
going to say for the achieving recognition now, this is the part where you're going to take those, the reintroduction that you're doing, right? To make sure that you are documenting those collaborations, for example. So let's say, for example, you connected with L'Oreal, for example. You want to make sure that things like, publications like Vogue and Refinery 29 and those sort of things, again, you've put all the pieces together in the R and the A. I'm sorry, the R and the N. So now to create the A, you have to document it, right? When I say
Mhm.
document it, get it captured. So you're creating
Okay.
social proof. So
Okay.
you would talk about the collaborations, talk about the partnerships, get testimonials, case studies,
Yes.
before and after results, but popularize them. And another thing that's new is, well, relatively, is micro influencer, right? So if you use micro influencer and expert endorsements, there's a lot of way. Hello, TikTok. I'm looking at you. A lot of people will talk about, something on TikTok and it blows up overnight because
Yeah.
somebody says,
Yeah.
hey, I use these vitamins and you should use them because these vitamins are amazing. So it would be that same thing, right? Getting those endorsements there. And then the next thing that I would say, and final thing, is to get awards and certifications. Now, the ones I'm talking about are like applying for clean beauty certifications, inclusion awards, innovation
Yeah.
grants, the ways that you can rebuild
Yeah.
credibility. Those are
Mhm.
the ones that I believe that the company should apply for to be able to, again, put that stamp in the ground. No, we turned a leaf. This is how we did it. And this is how you
Mhm.
can sort of RNA your way back into back into growing out of the setback and really setting it into the right place.
Into profitability, basically going
Mhm.
back into like get you back into a good place. So
Yes.
what? Oh, there's so much moving parts in here. So like we're incorporating AI, we're incorporating, networking and
Mhm.
building all that social proof and rebranding. What kind of mindset shifts do you think are necessary for business owners to be able to carry on with all of this organizational restructure?
So the mindset shift. So the mindset shift is, it's multi, I'm going to say, faceted. The leaders have to, well, the visionary, the head, right, has to have a particular mindset shift, but it
Mhm.
also has to be something that can trickle down into the
Mhm.
company, right? For it,
Mhm.
because one person having it at the top, it doesn't help to change, so to speak, the I'm going to say culture of the organization, unless it's something that people can follow. So that's
Yeah.
where I would say, that's why a lot of times when companies are going through transformation, they tend to
Mhm.
have like a theme or a slogan or something that people
Mhm.
can really connect to, like the
Yeah.
framework that I was talking to you about before. And then
Mhm.
once they have that, they use that to be able to say, well, okay, we're all getting on the same sheet of music here. So we are going to do X, Y, and Z, and this is why, and this is the thought behind it, or this is the science behind it, so that people understand the global vision, so to speak. And then once they use that, then that's the marching orders that they give, so to speak, to their um, business units or groups within the organization. But one thing that's very, very, very overlooked and underutilized are change champions or change agents. So those are people strategically placed throughout the company that literally become the evangelizers or the evangelists of the CEO's vision, right?
Okay.
So, whatever it is, they get like an extra layer of training. They have the ability to influence and really make a difference. And they become, the sort of the people that represent the RNA, the living version of the RNA. So they do need to rebrand, right? And what that looks like. So the leader has to redefine what success looks like, for example. And really, it means letting go of, let's say, the legacy way of doing things, the legacy systems, the outdated hierarchies, really, anything that's ego based, right? Letting go of those
Mm.
things. And it's not just external, it's also internal. So it's a
Mm.
shift typically from command and control to vision and collaboration. So what
Mhm.
does that look like? And they need to model this authentically, because people can not figure, but people can see when you're not being authentic, right? And not
Yeah.
adapting, but you're just
Yeah.
talking the talk.
Yeah.
Then from a networking, I'm going to say level of being able to influence people, you want to make sure that in this middle, you call it passage, that the middle managers and the team leads become the conduits, right, for that change. What does that
Mhm.
look like? So you have your leadership, then you have, their team, then you have the middle managers and the change agents that I was telling you about. They really can help to transform the organization in a way that, people call it the messy middle. It's messy because they're getting, pressure from top and pressure from the bottom, and they help to kind of make it all make sense. So how do we transform these middle managers into influencers that have the language, the tools, and proximity to really align with this vision in a way that makes sense? That's the other thing. And then finally, when it comes to achieving recognition, one of the things you want to make sure that they're doing is that as they are making the changes, the early adapters, right? You want to make sure you shine a light on those people so that you can show them embodying the shift to influence others. So they were like, oh, I saw Alejandra doing that the other day. I'm going to do that too. That makes sense, right? So culture doesn't change until it really becomes aspirational to align. It's not just something that's just out there, but it's something that people actually can see happening. And then, when we do, any level of recognition or like catching people doing the right thing, that's where it becomes valued and people continue to do it because they too want to be a part of, something that's good. So it's about visibility, credibility, and really just leading from a place of empowerment in a way
Mhm.
that, you need bottom up and peer to peer recognition on top of that leadership, right? The leadership guidance to really make it baked into the restructuring to make the transformation make sense in the culture.
So basically, get rid of the ego,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Change, be open to changing the
Yes.
legacy systems, the ego,
Hmm.
everything that was driven by the ego at the beginning.
Yep.
Um, and then go ahead and motivate your people
Hmm.
because that has to trigger down,
Hmm.
influence, empowered people in order
Hmm.
to make the organizational structure, the new one, sustainable and
Hmm.
adaptable to the new trends that are
That's right.
happening right
That's right.
now. Mhm.
I mean, the
Okay.
bottom line is that, one leader's mindset is not going to change an organization,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so when they rebrand, starting at the top, then when they network, working through the empowered middle, right? And then recognition kind of becomes their currency.
Yeah.
That is what creates a ripple effect, right? That's how
Mm.
organizations evolve in a sustainable way. It's not,
Yeah.
control and fear at the top, and it's
Mm.
not disarray, from the
Mhm.
bottom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I love what you said because I remember there was this company that just went that was just acquired by Pepsi Cola.
Hmm.
And one of the things that the founder said, and I started in a post, she said, I had to get rid of my ego in order to be able
Mm.
to grow my and she had to rebrand. So she basically put your framework to work because she
Oh,
rebranded
wow.
and got rid of her ego. And
Yes.
then the company got acquired by Pepsi
Yes.
Cola.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
it's just really left to say that sometimes is the leader mindset that is preventing the business to move forward, basically, or head to the next level,
Could be.
right?
Could be.
Yeah,
Could be. Which is
yeah,
why sometimes when the organizations go through transformation, they switch CEOs because
yeah.
sometimes they just can't.
True.
It's too
Yeah,
much of a, almost too much to give to get them,
yeah.
or at least for them to really lead through the next phase, if that makes sense. Because they
Yes.
have so much, bought in so to that particular organization in that way.
In living now in the digital world, there's, I mean, if you're not in the digital world, then you're basically not at all
Yes.
relevant. Right. So, like, because you have blended technical expertise with strategic foresight in your career,
Hmm.
how can entrepreneurs and business owners develop the technical acumen and leadership skills to navigate and transform into the digital world that we are right now?
I would say this. It's not a one answer, a one word answer, right? There's
Mm,
multiple ways to do it because
hmm.
depending on how you interact with the digital landscape, that's what dictates, I think, how much you need to kind of lean in. There is some level of leaning in across all industries. But for
Yes.
example, if you are working, let's say, as a nurse, for example, yes, are you going to come across technology? Yes, maybe with the blood pressure machine or the lab results or so on. But you don't need to understand like the coding for
Yeah.
how these things work. So you do need a certain level, base level of understanding. If you are a business that is digitally driven, right, then there's a different need, right, for you to stay abreast of what's happening. So for example, even though I am not technical in the sense that I'm not coding, I do make sure that I stay up to speed on like different things that come out in AI, the different certifications, whether it's Amazon cloud, what is AWS cloud migration, again, I'm not migrating anything, but I have an understanding of what that looks like so that I can apply that technical knowledge to my practical knowledge as I'm doing change
Mm,
management. So
hmm.
I think that there is a level of, again, assessing what the need is for the work that you're doing, and that's how you determine your path forward. So in my case, for example, I've done technical training, I've done AI training, I've also done my change management training and coaching and so on, because I blend them all together. But I try to always stay in a place of what will give me, or what do I need to have most to be able to do my job the best. And
Yeah.
so that changes, right? So I think to always be in a level of kind of keeping your eyes and ears open. What is the direction that companies or the world, so to speak, is going in, and can you meet the need? Is there demand for what you're doing, and if so, what makes you in demand in in your industry or your organization? What's your differentiator? What is your
Yeah.
niche that people?
Yeah.
Because for example, if I am, for example, in consulting and I'm in change management, I'm one of hundreds of thousands. Well, what I
Hmm.
try to do is differentiate myself through
Hmm.
the career pivot coaching or through the AWS cloud certification
Yeah.
or through
Yeah.
the AI,
Yeah.
certifications and that sort of
Yes.
thing to to
Hmm.
to to narrow, right, the
Hmm.
scope
Hmm.
of the things that I would be considered for.
So basically, determined the need,
Yeah.
right? And
After
then
assessing the right,
after
their
assess,
organization.
yes. Okay, after assess, identify,
Yep.
and then what makes you different? Because
Yep.
in reality, it's like we are in a competitive world. I mean, there's millions of us doing the same things, but what makes us unique and
Correct.
different than other ones
Yep.
is what basically moves the needle. That's really interesting. So, what, Patrice? What else is next for Career Nomad in the next future?
Oh my goodness. So what's next for Career Nomad? So Career Nomad, I am speaking at several conferences this year.
Okay.
Um, just this week, I'll be at the Society of Human Resource Management here locally in Georgia. I have some conferences coming up later on this summer. So speaking, lots of speaking. In addition to that, I have been I'm going to say on a virtual slash global tour, talking about how people can work through the layoffs because
Mm,
hundreds of thousands of people have been impacted by layoffs. So
yeah.
how can people really, tap into their core skills? Because a lot of people, especially, if they've been in their field or their role a long time, haven't had to have been in the job market. So they're
Mm-hmm.
not very well versed on, other than the title that they have, they're not very well versed on their core skills. So
Mm,
again, that assessment, right? The
okay.
self-assessment for the
Yes.
core skills, identifying of those core skills, which ones are in demand that you would like to do, right? And
Okay.
then based on that, network, right? So that people know that, hey, I have this type of experience, I have driven these types of outcomes. If you hear of anything, let me know, type thing, so you can be referred in. And then most importantly, really thinking back, in the job that you were last in before being laid off, what were the accomplishments, right? And I don't just mean awards. I mean, did you, staying with, let's say, change management or consulting, were you able to develop, let's say, a training program that, trained over 85,000 people, for
Yeah.
example? Were you able to save the company X number of dollars? How many people were you leading and what impact did it have? Talk numbers, talk quantifiable achievements that demonstrate your not only credentials, but your adoption of your role and how you were able to
Mm-hmm.
adapt that to
Mm-hmm.
different situations. So you want to get really crisp on what that looks like. And that's where a lot of people get stuck.
Wow. So you do public speaking. How can people, if somebody has a business, right? How can they interact with you and bring them to your business to help them with their people management, organizational culture, leadership, and I guess also innovate?
Yes, yes, yes. So they can reach me on my website, www.careernomad.org. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can either look me up by
Mhm.
my name or The Career Nomad. I'm the only one that's on there. In addition to that, they can reach out to me by email, hello@patricelindo.com.
And do you do a lot of work with business owners as well, or
I
just
do. I do
individuals?
both business owners, I do entrepreneurs, and I also do individual contributors. So, yes, I do quite a bit in addition to speaker coaching.
In addition to speaking coach, and do you see that there's a lot of more pivots going from like I guess yes, right, because of the economy, like working for someone to starting their own business now that
Or
it's
both, right?
or
Some people are doing a 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9. So, yes, both.
okay, wow, yeah. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, both, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
especially because of the economy.
That's
Wow.
right.
Yeah, Patrice, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about today?
I just think that it's important that people really understand that the hidden truth is that organizations, people, industries hit plateaus, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the greatest bottleneck isn't like explosive growth, right? It isn't the market, it isn't the model or the team, it's the mindset, right?
Yeah.
So it's horrible that, these layoffs are happening. Absolutely horrible. Give yourself a moment to just absorb that, yes, but then what's the next move going to be?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to, pick up the pieces and say, well, okay, yes, this is a loss, but these are the things I know how to do. How do you repackage what it is that you've done in your core and
Mm.
really have that conversation? And if you want to pivot, whether it be from industry or from that role, or just start something new, are there core things that you would start over with again? So if you think, for example, if you, for example, were renting a home or owning a home right now, even if you won the lottery, you're going to bring things from that home into your new home.
Mm-hmm.
So what
Mm-hmm.
are the things you're going to bring with you? What are
Mm-hmm.
the keys, the core transferable skills that you're going to bring with you? What are
Mm.
the levels of expertise or outcomes that you've accomplished that you can share? And that will benefit someone that you can apply across that industry. And then based on that, that's how you show up. So I want people to really, stop and think about what that would look like, because it's not often obvious, right? It's not like you're just going, let's say, as a teacher from one school to the next and you're teaching the same subjects. It's like, no, how can you take the core of what you know and apply it?
And always reinvent yourself. Basically, there's always room for reinvention and
Always.
rebranding and networking and
It's
achievement
empowering when you
recognition.
do it that
Yeah.
way. You get to really
Hmm.
be more autonomous
Yeah.
and really, get to a place where you are moving in a direction or a level of momentum that you're comfortable with, right? And that's important. Don't allow other people to put you in a box. You create your own box.
I am you just said to me what I say to myself every
Yes.
day since for like over 2 decades now.
Yes.
Don't put me in a box.
Yes.
I put myself in a box.
Absolutely.
My box.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you get to redraw your box as you want to.
Exactly. You get to
Yes.
do your box as triangular and
Yes.
hexagon as whatever you want it to
Yes,
be.
absolutely, absolutely. Do you have any questions for me? Is there anything else you wanted to ask
No,
me
this
that
is
you
great,
didn't?
Patrice. No, I'm so grateful that you came into the podcast.
Yes,
This was a very insightful and educational conversation for me and my listeners.
nice.
And I'm going to put everything where they can find you, the LinkedIn and all of that in the
Very
show
good.
notes. So
Very good.
I'm very grateful and thank you so much. And hasta la vista, muchachos. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.